Wildfires are sweeping across several European countries as those temperatures spike. In France, fires broke out on Sunday in the southwest of the country, burning nearly 400 acres, or about 160 hectares. In Turkey, 50,000 people have now been evacuated as firefighters tackle fierce blazes, mostly in the country's western provinces. Swiss Re, one of the world's top reinsurance firms, says about 480,000 people, think about that, die each year from extreme heat. That makes events like these much more dangerous than floods, earthquakes, and hurricanes combined. Joining me now is Swiss Re CEO Andreas Berger, and I want to thank you for joining us as we continue to deal with this extreme heat. I mean, your insurance company has pointed out there's clear evidence that extreme heat events are now more frequent and more severe. And I want to underscore a point here. This isn't going to change, given where we are, current climate conditions. So where do you see this going? We just heard from Melissa Bell about how the infrastructure in France, the heat is so severe that even the infrastructure is being impacted.
Yes, Paula, thank you for having me here. This is a serious problem, and the data shows clearly that the frequency and the severity, not only of extreme heat, but also natural catastrophes in general, is increasing. And clearly, there's something that has to change. The traditional or conventional measures are not sufficient anymore to address this problem. And I think here we need to all come together. It's not one party alone that can solve the problem. This is a multi-stakeholder approach. Just on natural catastrophes in general, 2024 was the 5th consecutive year where we exceeded 100 billion insured losses, US dollar insured losses. This year, we expect around 145 billion of losses of natural catastrophes. So this is something that we have to deal with. We, as a reinsurance company like Swiss Re, we are the shock absorber of the industry. We sit behind insurance companies, and we can provide parts of the solution, which is providing data models that we can provide a good understanding over 161 years of collection of data, loss data. And also we have more than 50 scientists who work on more than 200 proprietary models also to address this topic.
But people, and I say people, I mean stakeholders of all kinds, have to understand the data, the science, and then actually do something about it. I do want to get to what can be done in a moment. But I would say, if I look at it from my point of view, we all seem to be collectively jumping off a cliff here with no net. And the reason is because your predictions of uninsured losses are quite grave. And on top of that, we have governments who are less and less able to really back up those protections for people, companies, and their livelihoods. Where do you see this going? And when do you believe it will be so critical it'll be difficult to ignore?
So this problem, as I said, is too big to solve just by one party, by governments, for instance. We just have to come together. We can provide the data to understand, really. There's 3 steps that we need to look at to understand and quantify the risk. Very often, that's where the problem starts, because data is not readily available, it's fragmented. So I think we can help to make sense of it. Secondly, we need to talk about mitigation. There's so much that can be done. And thirdly, we can only talk about as insurance or reinsurance solutions. Now, it's the 20th anniversary, by the way, this year in August for Hurricane Katrina. If these events would happen again today, normally those losses would be 3 times higher. Now, in the case of Katrina, if this would happen again in Louisiana, it would be less impactful than actually Katrina in those days when it happened. Why? Because mitigation measures were taken. Also, building codes have been updated. So all these things are very important to reduce the exposure. There's a lot that can be done, but I think awareness creation, quantification of the risk, and trying to find out what actually can be done to mitigate it. And only then you talk about insurance and reinsurance to provide our balance sheet. This is a tripartite relationship. It's the government side, the public hand, the private industry, and we also, obviously, as the insurance and reinsurance industry, come to the party.
You know, this can seem a bit overwhelming, obviously for people in their own personal lives, but also for businesses. You know, a recent report that you published showed the vulnerabilities to infrastructure. And as I said, we just heard about in Paris how the rails were impacted. I mean, what do you say to people that, given the context right now, that the advice that you are giving people about mitigation is actually not taking place, or if it is taking place, not taking place quickly enough?
Yeah, we have more and more companies, but also municipalities coming to us and asking the question, what can we do? But not only today, but also what can we do in 10, 20, 30, 40 and more years? We need to anticipate, we need to do projections, and that we can simulate when we can assume, for instance, temperature rises. What does that actually mean, and what does that do to the physical assets of a municipality, the schools, the buildings, of companies, for instance, telecommunications companies, who are suffering now with the cooling of their data centers? That all can be anticipated, and one can plan for it. The investments can be directed towards mitigation properly and in advance. I think there's a lot that can be done, and I think as an industry, we can come together and provide our support for the solution.
Andreas Berger, a sobering conversation, but a necessary one. I want to thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Paula.